Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 24 in the Cobra Jet series, also known as Slither. Now in the last video I worked on the cowl, and the one before that I worked on the cowl and the air boxes and all that sort of thing. All that went really well. And I mentioned in that previous video that I either was going to install the torque boxes or the floor supports. I think it makes more sense to just go ahead and put in the torque boxes. The floor supports are a secondary item, and it shouldn't matter. Once you have the torque boxes in, the floor supports should not interact in any way with those. You shouldn't have to modify anything to put those in. As you can see, I'm wearing my old Midway Collision sweatshirt. It is a little cool today. This was our old body shop name, and I started this channel initially in order to support the body shop. That is long gone, so I still have the shirts. So let me show you what we're going to do and some of the details I want to talk about. So this is the area where the torque boxes go. We do have the two-piece torque boxes. I can assume by the color that these were made by Dynacorn. However, these are CJ classic pieces. And I always like to have them separated. I don't like to have the one-piece deal. It's too hard to put in. And in doing it with this configuration, it's a little more challenging because I have built all of this stuff. So the tolerances are matched, let's say, to the Dynacorn floor pan, and the floor support, I can't change any of that. That's the way it was made. And I've already done a little bit of test fitting, and I can tell you I'm going to have to make some modifications, maybe trim this here and there to make it fit, but that is not unheard of. One of the things that was brought up in a previous conversation is these frame rails and where they meet the floor pan. Now, the original layout for these cars, this upper piece here actually was sandwiched between the firewall and the frame rail. And I think the reasoning for that was they were putting it together and designing it, and they went ahead and put in the floor pan or the firewall with that piece already attached, and then the frame rail just interacted with it. Now that's fine. It doesn't really affect much. You end up with a little bit of variance on the end of the frame rail. However, I'm not doing it that way. I'd rather have the frame rail attached to the firewall like it was originally designed. And then what I want to do is take this part of the, let's say, upper torque box, and I'm going to modify it slightly so that this flange will still overlap that flange on the frame rail. I'm going to make it kind of like a joggle, just so it has some space, or so it doesn't have space between it, and the plate itself will go up against the firewall. Before I do any of that, I have to grind down these welds here and the welds on the bottom as well, because this plate here, that part of it, will mate up to the bottom. So I don't want any interference. I don't want anything throwing me off in that respect. Now, let me show you something else. Here I have my Mach 1. This car is virtually untouched. There's no rust in it. It's very solid, and it has the original torque boxes in it. Now if you look at these, you can see these transitions up here, they didn't exactly match each other. There is some variable there. Back here in the corner, there's a gap there, and over in that corner right here, there is a weld. And you can see that weld only runs down from this, let's say from this corner. It's kind of hard to get the light in there. So from this bend is where it starts, and it runs down maybe 3.5 inches. And then beyond that, there's no weld at all. There's basically just a gap there. Now it's not a gap, it's up against it, but I'm just saying it's not welded. And then it has that plate welded in, as I will put in as well. On this side we have just a couple of spot welds, and it does have that inner flange there as well. And underneath you can see the plate, and there's really not much else to show you on this part of it. There will be spot welds back here where it goes up into or attaches to the bottom of the floor support. You can actually see the number of spot welds. So like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in that section, and that's where it stops. Underneath, I have to get a little further under there. and look, but it looks like there's just one, two, like 3 spot welds holding that on. Of course, I will put more than that on there. I don't think that's enough, but 3 is where we're at. And that's about it for this. So again, the first thing I need to do is grind down these welds, get that ready to go, and then do some test fitting of these pieces so that if there's any trimming or adjustment that needs to happen, I can make it happen. This also, on this being the 69, has this kind of channel, and I believe that's for the parking brake. Yeah, that's for the parking brake. And then this hole down here, I believe, is for the fuel line. You can see it there, because that's the inlet for the fuel line, and then it goes straight through. Another thing I want to do is strip off this EDP coating on the inside here so I can apply primer and paint before I actually attach anything else. So you saw I did a test fit on this piece. I did grind down this edge a little because the angle was weird and it was digging into the inside of the frame rail. So what I want to do is create this joggle. So I put that tape on the bottom of the floor pan, basically, or on the frame rail I should say, indicating where the flange was, and then I set this back in place and drew out those lines, and then I measured. Basically, that tab on the frame rail is about 1 inch. So in this case, I've measured 1 1/8 inches. What I want to do, now there's a couple ways you could do this, honestly. I could just cut this out and just butt weld this up against that frame rail, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cut these 2 lines. I measured 1 1/8. I'm going to cut these 2 lines and then bend this and then rebend it so it creates that joggle shape. Bear with me. That should work. Okay, also keep in mind, this is the top that goes up against the firewall. So I need to bend this away from that and then bend it back with a slight joggle. I like to say joggle. Say it with me. Joggle. There you go. You know what I should do is redraw this line just so I know. 1 1/8. See if I can make this happen. I'll also tell you it's much easier to bend aluminum when you're doing aircraft sheet metal. Now the tricky part. Slight change of plans. I've got this really heavy welding table that I keep off to the side, and it usually gets covered up with junk, but I'm going to use it instead of my little welding table, that little light duty one. So I have a piece of steel here. This is actually part of the Cobra Jet, and I'm going to put that underneath this edge and just hammer this down to create that joggle. Hopefully you can see this okay. I know I have to put the camera off to this side, but we'll see what happens. You can tell I don't want to keep my hand there. And now, I don't know if you can see it very well, we have a joggle. So we'll do a little test fit and see how that works. Okay, let's see how it fits. That's nice. No gaps. Haha. Perfect. Perfect. Now what I'll have to do is I'll probably punch about 4 or 5 holes on this flange, and then I'll punch some holes. You know, I may just go through the floor pan itself, come up with a pattern that I like, avoiding this recessed area. There's no gain to welding through that, but just come up with a pattern. And then of course this edge over here gets welded up into this pocket, and then I can weld these shut so there's no gaps there either. And of course this bottom corner that goes against the floor support, I can weld that on the edge, and even right here I think this little tab will go up against the bottom. So yeah, like it was made for it. I like it. So as you saw, I took that little finger wheel, as I call it, and I cleaned off the EDP coating on the outside, or well, it's the outside of the frame rail, but inside where the torque box goes. And the idea is we're going to strip all that coating off and cover it with epoxy anyway, but it's easier to do it now than to have anything in the way. I have the plate held in place. Look, the jig came in handy again. It's holding the plate up against the bottom side of the firewall, and there are the holes that I will be welding shut. And I also put a pair of vice grips on the outside here and clamp that against. Now it doesn't fit perfect, and I didn't expect it to. It's got a little bit of a gap there, but once I get it welded to the floor pan, or the firewall I should say, I can hammer that over and just make it fit the way it's supposed to. And that'll get welded on the edge anyway. I'm not going to drill any holes. That'll get welded to the edge, or on the edge of the flange. Okay, this outer plate or forward plate, lower plate, however you want to call it, this thing is fitting very snug. I'm afraid to get it all the way in because I probably won't be able to get it out. Right now, this is just barely on the sticking out past the pinch weld, or sticking up against the bottom of the pinch weld. This corner is making contact with the frame rail, and down here I have a little bit of a gap. I may have to roll this corner over slightly just to give me a little more clearance. On this side it's nice and tight up against the kick panel, and of course it's mating really nicely against this forward part of the rocker. So what I probably will need to do before I commit to putting it all the way in is I will drill some holes along here so I can put in some plug welds. I will drill at least one hole over here, and of course drill these holes on the face. And other than that, well, I guess I could probably drill these as well, and I'll look underneath and make sure if I need to do any more holes before I commit to actually putting it in there. I also need to put some paint on the inside of the panel, and I may look at adding some seam sealer before I force this in and weld it, but as it is, I think it's going to be pretty close. Here's where we're at right now. I have scuffed everything on the inside, and I sprayed it with my self-etching primer, and then I topped it with Rust-Oleum. So everything is painted on the inside, and also I did that to the inside of the forward piece of the torque box. I've also drilled up all the holes, and there's the pattern I'm going to put on the bottom of the frame rail. Those are the holes that will mate to that flange right here that goes back, and then this little tab right here mounts to, I hope I can get the camera angle, that tab right there, which I have welded solid on the edge. And of course I have the holes here at the front where it meets the front of the rocker panel, and then these two inside holes which will go up here on the inside, and these down here which go to the inside of the pinch weld for the rocker panel. Now all I have to do is get that in there and start welding. Sometimes you have to improvise. Now I knew that I would have a hard time getting this in and back out if I needed to, and what I ran into is that flange at the top there that meets the inner panel. It's just a little bit down, or a little bit forward, let's say. So what I did is I used part of my jig system here, have the angle iron up against that, a couple blocks of wood, and then I pressed them in against that, and that pushed that flange back up against the other. And I can get underneath there and at least start welding that first one, and then readjust as needed to get the other ones nice and tight. here it is, all welded in place. No significant gap anywhere. I did a series of welds on the inner flange up against the frame rail. Of course, the plug welds here. Now this hole, the reason that hole is there is whenever you put the bracket to the inner fender, that's where it mounts. So I can show you that on the other car. Underneath, I have it all welded to, let's see if I can get underneath here far enough. So there it is, all welded to the bottom of the floor support. There are the welds to the mating flange and that weld there. And of course, if I could turn the camera around, it is welded to the inside of the pinch weld. So as I said, this hole right here, if we look at the other car, there's the hole, and that is, again, either for the bracket or that may be even for the inner fender liner splash guard. One of the two or both, but anyway, that hole needs to be there, so just so you know. This actually has more gap in it than the one that I put in, and you can see also the shape of it. This has the joggle that I like to say, so right there, and the other one is actually flat. Again, it only has the weld here in that top section. So, and of course there is one more piece that goes in, and that is this corner piece. And basically it sits like that. Line it up, make it fit flush, put welds in the bottom, put a weld over here, and make that even stronger. Alright, so I hope that was a good demonstration as to how you put in at least the passenger side torque box. I'll be honest, I did not get to the driver's side torque box. I strained my back when I was doing the passenger side, and I've been struggling with that for the last day or so. I also had some problems with the editing software for my videos, and I had to reboot the whole system. It just got complicated, and so it really delayed what I wanted to get done. But I hope I gave you enough details and an understanding of what you need to do to put in the torque boxes. I will get the driver's side in, and I will then work on the frame connectors. I know I said floor supports multiple times. I did not intend to say that. I meant to say frame connectors. So we're going to look at that possibly in the next video series. However, there are some other things that we need to do. We have to mock up the engine, transmission, check the tranny tunnel as well, and so there may be some conflict with the frame connectors at that point, but we'll have to resolve that. So I may end up going to the back of the car again and reworking or finishing up some of that stuff. I do have another quarter panel, as I mentioned, I think in the previous video. I think I did. We were looking at the Dynacorn panels, and they fit just a little bit better than the NPD panel, so we have another Dynacorn quarter panel for the driver's side. So I will be mocking that up as well, making sure everything lines up and it fits properly. As it is, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for your support in all these videos and everything that I do. I do have a Patreon page. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there are links in the description below, and my patrons support me in making these videos. So thank you to all of them as well. But that's the end of this video. So if you will, leave a thumbs up and a comment, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.